Ready for heaven, brother. You're ready to go. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good. Yeah, that's convincing. Hey, as our kids are dismissed, let's thank our worship team for leading us this morning. Hey, so I've preached in a lot of different places, different countries, different states. And I can honestly say this is the very first time I've ever preached with an octopus on the pulpit. So thank you guys for the VBS team that's been decorating. You guys have been working really hard. For those of you who don't know what VBS is we do like a week-long kids camp. It's every single night. It starts tonight at 4 o'clock. And we were going to have it outside, but we were praying, Lord, do you want us to have it outside or inside? And he answered that question pretty quickly. So we're going to be doing it all inside. We're not going to let rain stop us from serving children and families from all over Northwest Indiana. We're really excited about what God is going to do this week. And so please, if you're planning on being here, be here tonight, be here early, and we're going to see what God is going to do. If you got your Bible, go ahead and turn to Genesis chapter 29. We are working our way through the book of Genesis. If you don't have a Bible, we have some Bibles on the back welcome table. Feel free to grab one, keep that. That is our gift to you. We want you to read it. We want you to believe it. And want you to live it out. It's also going to be on the screen. But as we turn to Genesis 29, I have a question. When's the last time, I want you to think in your life, when is the last time you accidentally did something? When's the last time that you had an accident? So to give you some examples, some things to think through, have you ever, or maybe recently, accidentally sent a text to somebody that you didn't mean to send a text to? Wow, that was like an overwhelming yes. Yeah. You're like, how many got in trouble because you did that? Oh, you don't want to raise your hand, right? Or you accidentally call somebody. My mom accidentally called me last Sunday while I was up here, while she was sitting over there. We don't know how it happened, but it just accidentally happened. Like, literally, my phone's going off in my pocket, and I was like, oh, who's going to call me on a Sunday morning? And it's like, Mom. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it happens, right? Or have you ever accidentally maybe threw in a red piece of clothing with whites? You ever do that? Yeah, I'm not allowed to do laundry anymore because I did that. I just kind of throw everything together. I didn't know that was actually a thing, but it is. So we do things on accident, right? Have you ever, how about this one? Have you ever accidentally filled your pastor's office with balloons while he was in Phoenix preaching at a camp? I'm looking at you, Matt. All right. How about this? Have you ever accidentally hit a car that you did not mean to hit? We were talking about this the other day. Does anybody ever mean to hit a car? Is there ever, not usually, right? How about this one? So I feel like there's an overwhelming yes here. How about this? Have you ever accidentally married the wrong person? I was really scared I was about to get a yes. Listen. As crazy as that sounds, that is going to be exactly what happens in Genesis chapter 29. Now, for those of you who are just joining us, that sounds kind of bizarre. And maybe you had an epiphany that, hey, maybe the Bible isn't as boring and plain as I thought it was. Crazy things happen to crazy people. For those of you that have been with us as we've walked chapter by chapter, verse by verse through the book of Genesis, this is no surprise to you, right? This isn't the craziest thing to happen, a guy marrying the wrong person. But we've been looking at the book of Genesis, and for those of you who are new to the Bible or new to the book of Genesis, it's the very first book of the Bible. It's really the foundation of everything. And it includes real life situations, and sometimes the craziest of situations. And so God, in His sovereignty and in His perfect wisdom, takes situations like maybe a guy accidentally marrying the wrong person, a situation where you and I would immediately hit the eject button on, right? You ever get in a conversation that gets way more serious than what you thought it was going to be? You're like, hey, how you doing? Like, well, my wife left me, and you're like, oh, eject, like, I got to get out of this, right? Do you want some gum? Like, what do you say to that person? And God takes messy situations like that situations you and I would run away from, and God says, you know what? No, I can use this. I can work with this. And we're going to look at a crazy story this morning, but before we do, I want to give you kind of the big point of today. What's the main point of Genesis chapter 29? It's simply this. God can and does use all situations, all circumstances, all people, all of our sin, and even accidents in our life to bring about His plan and our good. In other words, this is what I tell our students all the time. There is no garbage with God. There is nothing in your life that God cannot use to bring about His plan for your life and your ultimate good. Amen. And that's good news. Doesn't that sound good? Yes. That nothing, not even accidents in our life, are unredeemable by God. Now, to set up this context for you, again, the book of Genesis is a book about beginnings. It's the beginning of everything but God. God was there in the beginning, and God created all things to worship Him and to work in a way that He designed it to work. Unfortunately, things became a mess because we as human beings chose to rebel against God and His creation and His design and do things the way that we think they ought to be done rather than following His plan. Now, God, in that moment, could have judged us as human beings. He could have judged the world. He could have wiped us out and started over. But instead, God took a man that we probably wouldn't have chosen, a man by the name of Abraham, who did not trust God, did not believe in God, and did not follow God. And God called him. And God said to him in Genesis chapter 12, this is kind of how I pitch the conversation. God comes to Abraham and He says, Abe, listen, I want you to look around you. The world is a mess. There's sin. There's disorder. There's chaos. There's injustice. There's disobedience. And there's death. Abraham, this is not how I created the world to be. Therefore, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring blessing into the world. I'm going to right all the wrong that was done by sin. I'm going to heal all the hurt that was done by sin. And I'm going to save a people who are lost without me. And I'm going to do that through a descendant, a son of yours, Abraham. And so we've been following God's promise through Abraham's life, and we see that Abraham had a son named Isaac, and the promise of God was passed down to Isaac. And then we saw that Isaac ended up having two sons, one named Esau and one named Jacob. And we've been left with the question, who is the promise going to be passed down to? Last time we were together, we found out that God chose the younger over the eldest son, that culturally, normally, even to this day, the eldest son would be the first to get the inheritance. He would be the first to get the blessing. But God said, no, I want Jacob, not Esau. Now, there were two problems with this. The problem is that Isaac actually favored Esau over his other son, Jacob. You guys remember that conversation? Favoritism. Those of you that have kids, right? It's as bad as we want to say. It's almost natural for us to gravitate towards one that we identify with more, or the more obedient one, right? But even though God chose Jacob, Isaac favored Esau, the older son, because he was kind of a man's man. He was hairy. He was tough. He was a hunter. Right? He liked to go out and kill, and apparently he fried a good batch of bacon because Isaac just loved it. And he loved his son. But that led Isaac to totally and intentionally disregard God's command to pass the blessing to Jacob. And so since Isaac chose Esau instead of Jacob, Jacob, with the help of his mother, decided to deceive his father, who was old and blind. He disguised himself as Esau, and he essentially stole the blessing away. Even though God had promised it to him, Jacob used his own means. He used deception to get the blessing. So this obviously happened, and so Isaac ended up passing the blessing down to Jacob instead of Esau, and this made Esau furious. Esau intended on killing Jacob. Jacob was kind of a mama's boy, and so Jacob's mother, Rebekah, said, no, your brother's trying to kill you. I want you to run. I want you to go to a place called Haran. My brother Laban is there. I want you to go there. I want you to get away for a couple days till things kind of calm down here. I want you to settle down, find a wife, start a family, and things are going to be okay. And last week, what we saw is Jacob started along his journey, and along the way, God interrupted his journey. He intercepted, and he gave Jacob a promise. It was at Bethel that God came and spoke to Jacob through a dream. And in Genesis chapter 28, verse 15, he said, I will be with you. Isn't that an amazing promise from God? How much comfort would that bring to your life if God came to you today and said, listen, wherever you go, wherever you are in life, whatever you do, I'll be with you. I'll protect you. I'll bless you and your family and your land. Now, this obviously would create a different step, right? And so with God's promise now behind him and faith inside of him, Jacob continues his journey from Bethel to Haran and Padan to his uncle Laban. And that's where our story picks up in Genesis chapter 29, verse 1. For those of you new with us, we just walk verse by verse through books of the Bible. We believe it's the best way to understand God's word and to see it. And so here it is, Genesis 29, verse 1. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east. One verse, what I love that God tends to do in his word is he tends to take the most complex things and makes them sound so simple. In verse 1, we're told that Jacob simply went on his journey. He continued on his journey. Now, what it doesn't tell us is how long this journey is. This journey is about 500 miles. Now, remember, there's no planes, trains, or automobiles, right? Jacob's got two things he's using, his feet. And so Jacob is walking, and this would be the equivalent of you and I leaving this church building. Okay, I did my research. Leaving this church building, getting out in our parking lot, walking up Cline Avenue to 8094, and walking to Buffalo, New York, or Memphis, Tennessee, or Kansas City. Walking. You're like, I wouldn't even walk up Cline Avenue, man. You're crazy, right? 500 miles. Now remember, Jacob, he's not an outdoorsman, right? He's kind of a softer bunch. You remember reading this? He's more of a man of the arts, right? He likes to stay inside. He likes to cook stew. He eats vegan. He rides a bike to be eco-conscious, right? He doesn't wear white after Labor Day. He's one of those guys that's not an outdoorsman, right? It's not bad. It's just different. But now what we're seeing is a very different Jacob. He's been out in the wilderness. He's been on a journey for a while now. He's toughened up a bit. He traded his pink polo for a muscle shirt, right? And we read that after God gave him this promise, he continued the journey, and he comes to a well in verse 2. As he looked during his journey, he saw a well in the field. And behold, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it. For out of that well the flocks were watered. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll away the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. All right, so Jacob's on his journey, and he comes to this well. And when we think about a well, we kind of have to think of the water cooler of BC. All right, I don't know how many work in an office setting, but the water cooler tends to be a central place where people go to have conversation, to be refreshed. And the shepherds, they would go to a well, and they would refresh their sheep, they would refresh themselves, but they would also conversate. It was a place of meeting. And in the Bible, it's often a place where things happen, big things happen. And so Jacob comes to this well, and he sees that there's 3 flocks and 3 shepherds, and there's a large stone over the well. And what they would do is they would put a stone over the well to protect the water, and it would take the shepherds working together to take the stone off to water their sheep. You guys tracking with me here? All right, so something's about to go down. Jacob comes to this well, in verse 4, he says to the shepherds, he says, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We're from Haran." Now, why is that important? Where's Jacob headed? Haran, all right? Is this a coincidence? Okay, I love this. At the camp I just spoke at in Phoenix, a 15-year-old girl, okay, in front of about 150 students was talking about her life and how there's no coincidence in life. And she said this, "In life there are no coincidences, there's only God instances." In other words, God is working everything out. There's nothing done by mistake. Isn't that good? I don't know if she stole that from somebody, but I'm totally giving her credit for that because it's so good. There's only God incidences, and so God is sovereignly working out even the small details of things. So where are you guys from? We're from Haran. Oh, that's convenient, right? Verse 5, he said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" All right, now this is interesting, right? Who's Laban? It's his mother's brother. It's his uncle. Okay, it's the man he's going to meet. Now, I love this because it's not really said in the text, but does Jacob say, "Do you know my uncle Laban?" No, he doesn't, right? He's playing it cool because he's like, I don't know how these guys feel about him, right? I don't know what he's like. I don't know if they have a good relationship, bad relationship. So I'm going to play it cool. "Do you know Laban?" And here's what they said. "We know him." Verse 6, he said to them, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well. And see, Rachel," listen to this, "Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." All right. Coincidence? God incidence, right? So we got to get this picture now. Jacob's talking to the shepherds, and he says, "Hey, do you know Laban?" They said, "Yeah, we know him. Is he good? Is he alive?" "Yeah, he's alive. In fact, hey, here comes his daughter, Rachel." Now, we got to use all of our senses when we read the Bible, because this is kind of how I picture it going down. Jacob's asking the shepherds, and Rachel's walking up behind him, and here is where the music kicks in. I imagine Louis Armstrong's "What a Wonderful World," right? "I see trees of green," right? And Jacob slowly turns around to see Rachel coming up the hill. And we're not told this yet, but in a moment, Moses is going to tell us that Rachel is just simply beautiful. She's gorgeous. And she brings sheep with her. It's an interesting thing that the Bible points out. It says that Rachel was coming up with sheep. Now, that doesn't sound so enticing to us. But men, this would be like them saying, "Oh, here comes that beautiful girl. She's driving a Corvette, and she likes UFC." All right? This is like they're throwing some hints out that Rachel's not only beautiful, but she's attractive. There's something special about this girl. And I love this. Okay, so beautiful girl coming up the hill, Jacob looking for a wife, right? Look how Jacob responds. Verse 7. He said, "Behold, it is still high day. Is it not time for the livestock to be gathered together, water the sheep, and go pasture them?" What's Jacob doing? Don't you guys got someplace to be? He's trying to get alone with Rachel, right? He's saying, don't you guys have something you need to go do? All right. He's trying to be alone. Verse 8, they kind of ruin it. But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, then we'll water the sheep." Now, this is a pretty interesting statement. What they're saying here is, we can't go anywhere. We have to stay right by the well because it actually takes all of us together to move the stone to water our sheep. In other words, not any one of us can just simply move this away. And the sheep aren't going to water themselves. In other words, they're like, we're not going anywhere because we have to move this stone. Now, this is important because of what's about to happen next in this story. You see, Jacob, looking for a wife, really, he has nothing to offer. Jacob has no possessions. He has no home. He has no money. He has no job. He has no family. He has no sheep. In other words, he has nothing on himself that he can use to offer this beautiful girl and to give her something or show her something that would impress her. So what is he going to do? Verse 9, well, while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Ladies, did she have a job? She had a job. If you have a job and you find a guy that doesn't have a job, right? He's not very impressive, right? You're like, even I have a job, right? I have a home. I have money. I have possessions. I have things. He has nothing to offer her. Verse 10. I love this. Now, as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near, and what did he do? And he rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. All right, what did Jacob do? Rachel came up. He's like, oh, hey. Oh, you need that stone moved? Let me get that for you. Oh, right? And he just moved that giant stone by himself. It took all the shepherds to do it, but he did it by himself. Are you impressed yet? All right. Right? Ladies, listen to me. First impressions are important, aren't they? Come on, ladies, help me out. I know you don't like to say what you really think, right? Oh, you're like, now I'll tell you what I think, right? Right? Aren't first impressions important? They're pretty important, right? Guys, isn't this what you would do, right? You would do something extraordinary to impress the lady that you're interested in, right? Ladies, I don't know if you know this or not, but you have this amazing gift of making us as men work harder, play basketball better, be stronger, right? Suck in a few inches farther than is even physically possible. And if we really, really, really like you, we're going to do whatever it takes to impress you. Thank you, men. All right. You see, Jacob had nothing to offer her except his strength and a willingness to serve her, because he waters her flock. Now, ladies, would you be impressed by this? He's strong. He's willing to serve. He's willing to do the hard work to earn your heart. First impressions are important, but look what happens. Verse 11, then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. Men, first impressions are important, but second impressions are also important. This is not a good model to follow, right? I don't care who you are, when you lived, that's simply weird, right? He serves her, and then he kisses her, and then he cries. Now, we don't know. I feel like scholars try to explain this away. It's like, well, culturally, maybe it's just like a family thing. They kiss to show affection. But she doesn't know their family. She knows nothing about this man. He kisses her, and after he kisses her, he cries. And they're like, well, he's so overjoyed. I don't care who you are. This is weird. So Jacob has to redeem himself. So I feel like these things happen quickly. He moves the stone. He waters the sheep. He sneaks in a kiss. Then he cries. And then he does this in verse 12. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman and that he was Rebekah's son. And she, okay, what is she going to do? What is she going to do? Ladies, what do you do when a stranger kisses you and then starts crying? You do what she does. She ran and told her father. Okay, I've taught my daughter, this is biblical, okay? When a stranger comes to you, when you start dating, you just run to daddy, right? So she runs to dad. Dad, there's a weirdo who says he's Abraham's grandson. He says he's family, all right? You want me to call the cops? What do you want me to do, all right? He's coming. He's here. Now, look what Laban does, her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son. All right, do you guys remember Laban? All right, we met Laban before in the book of Genesis. Laban is Jacob's mother's brother. Okay? Jacob's grandfather, Abraham, when he wanted to find a wife for his son, sent a servant named Eleazar to this man Laban to find a wife. And Laban said, well, my sister is here. And he gave his sister up to be Isaac's wife, Rebekah, now Jacob's mother. Okay, you guys tracking with me here? I know it's a little confusing, but it's important. Because what kind of guy is Laban? Is Laban a good guy or a bad guy? We don't really know. We don't really know, but what we do know is this. The last time we met Laban, and the last time he interacted with anyone from Abraham's family, Laban was very concerned about how much money he was going to get out of the situation. Laban is a businessman, and he will do whatever it takes to turn a profit. This is why we see his reaction in verse 13. As soon as he heard that Jacob, the grandson of Abraham, is coming, he ran to meet him. He embraced and kissed him. Too much kissing, man. And he brought him to his house, and Jacob told Laban all these things. And Laban, I love this, Laban said to Jacob, surely you are my bone and my flesh. Laban pulls Jacob into his house, and he says, come here, Jacob. No need to explain, right? Listen, your family. Mi casa es su casa, su dinero es mi dinero, right? We're all Oh, you guys didn't catch that. My house is your house, and your money is my money. We're all family, right? We take care of each other. Come in. And Jacob stayed with him. This is really important, verse 14. How long did Jacob stay with him? Jacob stayed with him a month. Now, you remember back in Genesis chapter 27, when Rebekah, Jacob's mother, sent him away, she literally said, go for, the Hebrew word is simply for a few days. Go away for a few days until things calm down between you and your brother. How long has it been? At least a month, if not longer. You see, sin has consequences that we can't always see. There are choices you and I make in our life that so often when we make them, we actually can't see how far the consequences go. This is going to cause problems because Jacob is now away from his family for a really long time because of his sin. There's division, there's hurt, there's pain there. Verse 15. And Laban said to Jacob, because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? So what happens is like time just speeds. So 1 month passes, and Jacob has been serving Laban. He's been working for him for essentially for free. And Laban, after a month, finally comes to him and says, I was thinking the other day that, you've been working for me for like a month, and maybe you'd like to get paid? How many have ever done an internship before? A non-paid internship, right? Marlone's waving at me over there, man. You've been working for me for a while now, doing things, and maybe you'd like to get paid. Now, Jacob has been thinking about this for a month, and he has an answer to give, but before he gives his answer, we're given some pretty important information. Verse 16. Now, Laban had 2 daughters. Now, why is Jacob there? Jacob's there to find a wife. All right. Now, we're told that Laban has 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. All right, the name of the older was Leah. All right, let's talk about Leah for a second. Leah, her name, in the Bible, names are really telling. They're really important. Does anyone know what Leah means? The name means wild cow. There's nobody here named Leah, right? If there is, go back to your parents and tell them they did bad scholarship, right? They need to do some research. I'm thankful that we don't, but if we do, Lord bless you, and there's ways to change your name if you'd like. But the name Leah means wild cow, and this is kind of telling. The name of the younger was Rachel. Now, Rachel means little ewe, all right? And not like ewe, but like little sheep. So I figured we would talk about this. What does that look like? Because we're kind of lost because we don't have farm animals that I know of around here. And so let me show you what a wild cow looks like. That's a wild cow. Kind of cute. Makes me think of Chick-fil-A, right? How about a little ewe? Aw, isn't that sweet? All right. All right, let's get that off. there's an obvious difference here. And the Bible is trying to contrast Leah with Rachel. And what it says in verse 17, it goes on, Leah's eyes were weak. Right? Now, we don't know exactly what that means. Some scholars mean that maybe she had a lazy eye, or she was cross-eyed, or maybe she was blind. Others say that maybe she just didn't have that, right? Men, you remember when you first met your wife? And you saw that sparkle? And so maybe Leah just didn't have that sparkle for Jacob, or maybe it was some other eye problem. But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. In other words, Rachel was the whole package. Both eyes were straight. She was beautiful. She had a job. She was very attractive. And this is why we're told in verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for the younger daughter, Rachel. So Laban says, Jacob, what do you want from me? What can I give you for a wage for working for me? And Jacob has a one-word answer. Rachel. I want Rachel. He says, I'm willing to work for you for 7 years for free. Just let me marry Rachel. Now, this isn't some informal proposal. What Jacob is doing here is during this time, if you wanted to marry somebody, let's say I wanted to marry Faith, I would have to go to her father, Doug, and say, here's what I'm willing to give you as a bride price in exchange for letting me marry your daughter. Now, during this time, a typical bride price would be about 2 years' wages. What that would do is it would give the father the ability to either buy hired help or to replace the daughter where she would have a responsibility, chores, things like that. And so 2 years was a typical bride price. How much is Jacob willing to pay for Rachel? 7 years. 7 years. Now, this isn't the point of the text, but I think this is really, really important, especially in our time and in our culture. Men, let me ask you some questions. How hard are you willing to work for your wife or a wife? How far are you willing to go to honor the girl that you love? Are you willing to put some childish things aside? Are you willing to do whatever it takes to work as many jobs as it takes to provide and take care of your wife? Or to be the kind of man that could take care of a wife? Ladies, listen to me. Don't settle for a man who's not willing to work or wait 7 days, let alone 7 years. If he's not willing to work, to provide, to honor you by paying the bride price and walking down the aisle, he's not worth you. So don't give yourself away. See, Jacob doesn't have a lot to offer, but he made this formal proposal to the father, and he says, I'm willing to do this. Now look at how Laban responds. Verse 19, Laban said to him, this is good stuff, it's better that I give her to you than I should just give her to any other man, so stay with me. Let me ask you, did he say yes? Did he shake hands? Did he agree to the proposal? Not really. He's more like, I guess it would be all right if I give her to you instead of somebody else. Now, it's important because he never said yes. So Jacob, verse 20, Jacob served 7 years for Rachel. Again, complex, packaged down. 7 years. This man worked every single day for 7 years to gain and pay the bride price for his wife Rachel. And look at this, verse 20. And they seemed to him but a few days because of the love that he had for her. Man, that's sweet. Men, isn't it a lot easier to go to work when you know that you're providing for your family? It makes those hard days bearable, right? And men that are single, listen, men that are working and you're becoming the man that God is turning you into to be a good husband, to be a good provider. None of those days are wasted of hard work and effort. For Jacob, it seemed like a couple days to him. 7 years, a couple days. Because he loved her so much. This is good. Verse 21. 7 years passed, and then Jacob said to Laban, "Get me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed." Now that might sound a little crass, right? But this man's been working. He's been waiting for 7 years, and he's just like, "Give me my wife," right? I want my wife. I've completed the task. I've done it. I've done what you asked. I've done what you told. I paid the price. I'm ready for the wedding day and all the blessings of marriage. I'm ready to have my wife. And here's where things get interesting. Verse 22. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. All right? So Jacob pays the 7 years. He works 7 years. It's now time for the wedding. Laban is throwing a big party. He gets all the family together. So we got to get this image of a wedding day, a wedding ceremony. Okay, in our time, we don't use veils as much as we used to, but in this time, the woman would be completely veiled. So think of all-white dress with an all-white veil. You could just see her eyes. You would think that might give it a little way, but we're going to see how things go. But you could just see her eyes. And the wedding feast is happening. They're eating. They're drinking. Everybody's having a good time. And then that awkward moment that everybody knows about but nobody wants to talk about comes where it's time for the husband and the wife to now leave and to go and consummate the marriage. So Jacob and Rachel are now married, verse 23. But, now the word but in the Bible is either a blessed but or a cursed but. It's either a very good thing or a very bad thing. There's no in-between buts in the Bible. Verse 23, but in the evening. So when is it? Evening. What is it like outside? It's dark. They've been eating. They've been drinking. They've been partying. They've been having a good time. But in the evening, he, that's Laban, took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. Verse 24, Laban gave his female servant Zilpah to his daughter Leah to be her servant. That's going to be important later. And in the morning, Jacob wakes up, and it's been a long night. He rolls over, and what does it say? It was Leah. It was Cowface. It was Leah. It was not the woman that he thought he married. And Jacob, it says that Jacob said to Laban, I picture Jacob just running out of the tent in his boxers, right? He runs to Laban. What is this you've done to me? Did I not serve you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me? All right, men, would you be a little mad? Would you? Oh yeah. Almost got an amen from the men there, right? I'd be a little mad, but we got to see what's going on here. Jacob goes to Laban. He says, what have you done? I worked 7 years for Rachel, and you gave me cow, right? Leah, you tricked me. You tricked me. And then he says this, you deceived me. Now, why is that important? What does Jacob's name mean? Deceiver. The Hebrew's Yaakov, which means heel grabber, trickster, ankle twister. The trickster got tricked, and the deceiver got deceived, and he's mad about it. Now, you got to remember, the whole reason that Jacob is even at Laban's house right now is because he tricked his father and tricked his brother and made them so mad that the brother wanted to kill him. And so he is there because he deceived. Look at verse 26. Laban, remember the kind of man that Laban is. He's a businessman. He said this. He said, it is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. This is a couple things, okay? This sounds very different from verses 13 and 14, doesn't it? 13 and 14, Laban's like, hey, you're family. Come on in. We love you. And now he's saying, well, I don't know how it's done where you live, but where we come from, this is how we do it. It's not just a change in tone, but it's also a slap in the face, because I have the feeling Laban knows what was going on. Because he says this, he says, it's not godly. It's not right. It's not moral. It's not good to give the younger before you give the older. You know what he's doing? He's slapping Jacob in the face because Jacob is the younger. You see, what happened is Laban did to Jacob just the opposite of what Jacob did to his father. See, Jacob traded the younger for the older, and Laban traded the older for the younger. And the deceiver was deceived. So Laban draws up some new terms in verse 27. He says, complete this week, or complete the week of this one. In other words, what happened is a wedding ceremony during that time was 7 days long. It was a 7-day party, a 7-day feast. And so he says, finish out this week, and then he says this, and we will give to you the other, he doesn't even say Rachel, the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. In other words, all right, I'll give you Rachel too, but you need to work for me for another 7 years. Now let me just ask you, because it's not really said, and we don't really hear anything, but how'd you like to be Leah at this point? Right? Nobody wants you. Your father's basically just passing you off. Your husband really wants to be married to your sister, right? Sound like a Jerry Springer episode. This family's a mess. This situation is a mess. Now, we could start to feel bad for Leah, but you have to see that she's trying to find fulfillment in her husband. We're going to see that next week. Right, she's not a passive party. She went along with this plan. But this situation is a mess, and now Laban offers Rachel for another 7 years. In verse 28, Jacob did so, and he completed her week, that's Leah's week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Now, a lot of people don't realize this. Jacob had to work 14 years for Rachel, but before Laban gave Leah at the end of the 7 years. Now he's giving Rachel at the beginning. He's paying up front. So Jacob was married to Rachel the 7 years that he worked for Laban. A lot of people say he worked 14 years, then got Rachel. That's not so. He worked 7, got Rachel, and then worked another 7. But then verse 29, we're told Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So verse 24, verse 29 are important for what's about to happen next week. So Jacob, verse 30, went into Rachel also. Listen to this. And he loved Rachel more than Leah. All right, do you think that's going to be a problem? Yes. Is it a problem to be married to 2 women? Yes. It's ungodly. God condemns polygamy in the Bible. It's not ideal. It's not best. It doesn't work. Not only is he married to 2 women, but he favors one over the other. Now, where did we hear this before? Wasn't he jealous because his father favored his older brother over him? This is a mess, isn't it? Well, we've got to stop here because we have enough to talk about. I think the biggest question we're left with after we study Genesis 29 is, where is God in all of this? Where is God in this situation? His name never comes up. He never speaks. Nobody prays. Nobody reads the Bible. Nobody brings up God's work in the past. How could God allow this to happen? Why would God allow this to happen? You know, where's the angelic ladder that Jacob once saw in a dream not that long ago? Where is God's promise to always be with Jacob, to provide for him? Remember we said that's so good to know that God is with you, protecting you and guiding you? Well, where's God's promise in this? Where's Jesus in all of this? Well, up until this point, it seems like God is nowhere to be found. And he's not interceding in this situation, stopping it from happening. But God is right where we expect him to be, right where he said he would be. God is right here in Genesis 29. He's there, but he's silently and patiently working behind the scenes in the middle of this mess. God is there. He's working all things in Jacob's life to bring about his plan and Jacob's good. Now you might think, well, how in the world is he doing that? Well, we need to know this. We need to know this. It might be hard to believe, but I want to show you that God is working in Jacob's life in two different ways. And if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, then you serve that Jacob is serving. You worship the same God that Abraham worshipped. And so you need to know that not only is God working in these two ways in Jacob's life, but he's also working these two ways in your life. And so here's the two ways. The first way is simply this. God sometimes allows certain people or certain circumstances in your life to show you your sin. God sometimes allows certain people or certain circumstances into your life to show you your sin. Now don't check out, because there's a number two that's really important. But we have to get number one first. Sometimes God allows certain people or circumstances in our life to show us our sin. Now, when it comes to Jacob and Laban, God allowed the deceiver to be the receiver of deception. You see, Jacob thought he got away with sinning against his father and deceiving him. I mean, he sinned against his father. He sinned against his brother. He got a job. He got a wife. He got two wives. He had a comfortable life with a new family. He had no worries. Things seemed to be going really well. And he seemed to have gotten away with deceiving his father. But then comes Laban. And Laban brings a situation in Jacob's life that God used to expose the hypocrisy by putting him on the receiving end. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you have some difficult people in your life? Do you have some people in your life that make you wonder, God, why did you let this person come into my life? Or God, why did you let this situation happen to me? Well, a great follow-up question then would be for us to ask, God, what are you trying to root out of my life? By bringing this difficult person or by bringing this difficult situation in my life, what are you trying to show me about myself? What are you trying to teach me about my sin? God, don't show me their sin. Show me my sin. Show me the way that I'm struggling to worship you. Show me the way that I'm not looking to you. I'm depending way too much on myself than on you. You see, that was Jacob's biggest fault. He never prayed. He never looked for guidance. He saw a beautiful woman, and he decided because she was beautiful and beautiful alone, that was enough to be his wife. Here's the beautiful reminder of how big our God is. He can use the sin that is done against you by difficult people in your life for your good. Now, that's not the only part. Because God isn't just out to expose our sin. He is, secondly, sometimes God allows certain people or certain situations in our life to happen to show us His grace. To show us His grace. You know, for those of us who have been following Jacob's life, we might be tempted to think that Jacob just got what was coming to him, right? There's a little bit of poetic justice here, right? You see it happen in life, right? You know somebody that's a liar, and it's almost a bit of poetic justice when you see a liar get lied to, or a cheater get cheated, or a bully gets beat, or a greedy person gets robbed. And it's real easy for us to sit back and think, wow, like, man, they got what was coming to them, but what about us? Because when God exposes our sin, then what we should immediately realize is what we deserve is His wrath, His judgment, His justice. There's times in our life where circumstances or situations happen, and we say, this is exactly what I deserve. I got what was coming to me. But here's the beautiful thing about the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a beautiful word called grace. That God looks at you, He knows what you deserve, He tells you what you deserve, but instead He gives you what you do not deserve. He gives you His Son, Jesus Christ, who comes and lives a perfect, sinless life, the life that you and I were called and created to live. Then, on the cross, Jesus takes our sin, He takes our punishment, He takes the wrath of God that you and I deserve, and He gives us His righteousness. He gives us His perfect life. He gives us His reward. He gives us grace. And because of what Jesus has done on the cross, that through faith you and I can receive forgiveness from God of our past, our present, and our future sin. That we can receive a righteous standing before God, that when God looks at you, He no longer sees your sin, but He sees Jesus. And He gives you the greatest reward, which is eternal life with Him, with no more sin and no more suffering. God gives us grace. And God uses people in our life, and He uses situations in our life, and He uses circumstances in our life to show us that what we need is not anything in this world. We don't need a husband. We don't need a wife. We don't need to be loved. We don't need anything in this world. We don't need money. We don't need anything, but we need Him. We won't believe that until God strips the sin away of our life. He exposes the things that we struggle with. He uses the difficult people. He uses the difficult circumstances to strip you away of what you're depending on when you're not depending on Him. And in the end, what you and I have to do is, like Jacob, we have to look to God and say, God, I have nothing to offer. I have nothing to offer to you but my sin. But God, I want your grace. God, I need you. God, my life has been difficult. These circumstances have been difficult. They've been weighing on my heart. And I realize that in the end, what I need is not justice, is not deliverance, is not any of these things. I need you, God. And God says, trust my Son, Jesus. Through Him, you can find forgiveness. You can find everything that you need. Let me ask you, in your life right now, have the difficult people and the difficult circumstances, have they caused you to be bitter against God? Bitter against those people? Or are you going to let God use those people and use those circumstances to bring you closer to Him? Maybe there's some people that you need to reach out with and say, you know what, I've been mistreating you, I've been doing these things. I didn't realize that all along God was trying to use you to show me my sin, not your sin, my sin. To show me that what I need is not so much to be right all the time, not to get what I want, but to have God's grace in my life. And I don't know. I don't know what God is doing in your heart. I don't know what He's doing in your life. But here's what I want to do. In a moment, I want to invite you to just spend this time praying. Don't worry about anybody else around you. I want you to spend this time praying. It's just you and God. And maybe for the first time, you want to cry out to Him and say, God, I need your grace. I've never trusted you. I've never confessed my sin. I've never believed in your Son, Jesus, but I'm ready, and I want to do that today. I want to tell you, you can leave here changed forever. But you have to trust Jesus Christ. Maybe you have trusted Jesus, and there's just been some circumstances or situations in your life. I know there have been in mine. Man, God has been just stripping things away in my life. And I can't blame anybody else but me for that. But He promises His grace. Are you trusting that grace? Are you looking to God? However God is calling you to move in this time, I'll be standing in the back. I'd love to pray with you. I'd love to talk to you. However God calls you to move in this moment, I pray you do. But don't waste this time. And when you're ready to sing, just stand and join Gabe and singing praises to the one who paid our debt, who gave us eternal life. He deserves our worship, doesn't he? He's a good God. Amen. Let's pray.